All right, young scholars of my enrichment class, we are going to do something kind of different today. We haven't gone through all the things about Google Slides in our Google checklist, but we're going to jump into some more advanced things right now. I went to lunch with some colleagues and we got around to talking about board games of all things, and I can't remember why, but the game Sorry came up. If you're not sure what Sorry is, hopefully I have the foresight to talk about the game before you jump into this, but it looks kind of like this. Now, this is a very modern version of Sorry, meaning that it's come out recently, probably in the last 10 years. And over the course of time, you can see that the game has changed a little bit in terms of its style. Not that the rules have changed, the rules are all still the same, but this looks like an old board, and this looks like a new board. Now, as I look at this old board, and I was thinking about it at lunch, I noticed something kind of interesting. These shapes are all in Google Slides, are Google Slides ready. So I thought, what better way to teach my enrichment class than to have us recreate this board in Google Slides. So let's do that. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to create a new Google slide. I don't care how you do it, but my favorite way is to go to slides.new. Now, as we create our new Google slide, the first thing that you should always get in the habit of doing is first clearing everything off because you don't need all of this stuff, and secondly, titling it. So I'm going to title mine Sorry Game Board, and you should probably do the same. And then the next thing I want to do is I need something to trace over. Like, I need a good reference for my Sorry game. So a good way to do this is to pick one that is from overhead. Now, this one's not a good example because it looks like it cuts off part of the board. I need the whole thing. Let's try this one down here. Perfect. This is the entire board of the game Sorry, and we can use this. For you, you're going to want to do a 2-finger click, or a right click if you have a mouse, and then you can open this image into a new tab. Boop, there it goes. Let's get that. Great. Now, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get this web address here and make sure that it ends in .jpg. We call this a JPEG. This is a type of image file. There are lots of different types of image files, but JPEGs are the most common. Get this web address, copy it, go back to your game board. Oh, one thing that we do need to know, if you hover your mouse over your tab up here, it'll tell you Sorry Game Board StephenParker.jpg, and in parentheses it tells you the dimensions, or how long and how wide this picture is. And in this case it is 900 by 900 pixels. If you don't know what pixels are, we should hopefully cover that in another lesson, but every image is made up of pixels. This is 900 wide and 900 long. So we'll go back to our slide, go to File, all the way down to Page Setup, and instead of widescreen, we're going to go to Custom. We're going to change our units from inches to pixels. We are going to do 900 by 900. Then we move up to Background. We can choose an image by URL, and we can paste that JPEG that we just copied, and now we have the board on our slide, and I can't damage it, I can't move it, I can't do anything to it, which is great. So now I'm free to draw over this slide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and zoom in, and you can do this a couple of ways. If you click in your staging area, you can hold down Control and Alt at the same time, and you can hit your plus or minus buttons to zoom in or zoom out. You can use this button up here, it's the magnifying glass. I can zoom in, and I can also zoom out the same way. If I press my little arrow next to zoom, I can fit whatever is on my stage to my area. I can zoom in to a certain percentage, and I also have zoom in, zoom out features. Because I like to go fast, I'm going to click back over to my mouse, which is my select tool. I'm going to click into the staging area, not necessarily on an item or anything, just anywhere in this workable area. And I'm going to Control Alt plus plus. And I can move around the stage freely using my slider at the bottom, a slider on the side here, And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the easiest parts first, and I want to make the squares on my board. Now, hopefully you haven't gotten rid of your game board. In fact, what you might want to do is you might want to bookmark it so we can come back to it later. Pick a folder that you know it's going to be on, or pick the bookmark bar, and it will just live up here for now until we're done with this assignment, and you can get rid of it later. But I will be drawing over this game board, so occasionally I'll need to go back to this image to get references for what I need to do next. So the first thing I want to do is make a square roughly the size of this corner square. So go to my shapes. I'm going to pick square, which is the first thing under the first category. I'll start down here. I'm going to draw my square by clicking and then dragging the mouse while I'm still clicking down to roughly the size of a square. And it may not be exactly perfect, but that's okay. One thing that we can do is we can even drag this over here to one of these squares, make it perfectly aligned with this square, drag it to where it needs to go, and it should kind of fit that same square area. Maybe drag it down here, see if it lines up. What I'll also want to do, it looks like this is already the same color, it's kind of a gray color here, but I want to change my pencil to dark black and maybe thicken this up to 2 pixels to kind of give it that boxy look. And so now here's what I'm going to do is instead of drawing the perfect square each time, I want them all to look kind of the same. So let's double check, make sure this fits. Yeah, it does. Let's go ahead and put it back into this corner, and then we're going to duplicate it. And you have another way you can duplicate. You can either go 2-finger click or right click and then duplicate, which should be somewhere in here. Maybe it's not. Weird. Maybe up here somewhere. Format, edit. There we go, edit, duplicate. Or you can just press Control or hold down Control and then press the D key for duplicate. So that's what I'm going to do. That's my fast way of doing it. So Control D. I'm going to drag this away, let go, and then bring it back underneath and check this out. I'm going to make sure it's perfectly aligned. See that red line right there? Means it's aligned. I'm going to bring it up, and you can see another red line as I bump into it. And you'll notice too that your mouse, you can't move it immediately once you bump in. If I move past it, it'll move, but there's almost like a locking feature when you do that. And I want this. I want it to be bumped up, so that horizontal or that left and right red line, and I want it to be right in the middle, which is that vertical or up and down red line. So now I have 2 squares. And instead of duplicating 1 square at a time now, what I can do is I can click my mouse and drag an area, and everything that falls in this area that isn't in my background will get selected, which means, boom, 2 squares. Now I can slide down just a little bit. I'm going to duplicate these 2 squares. So instead of duplicating 1 and making 2 and then duplicating another 1 and making 3, I'm going to duplicate these 2 and make 4. I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to drag away, make sure they're both still selected. I'm going to come at it from the bottom. There we go, right in the middle. Bring it all the way up and then bump. Now one thing you may notice too is that our squares are starting to move past the squares. So like my 4th square seems like it's a little bit bigger than the 4th square of my background, and that's okay. We're going to fix that later. Now let's go ahead and zoom out just ever so slightly. I'm going to Control-Alt-minus key, zoom out just a little bit, bring my slider down, select my 4 squares, Control-D, so instead of duplicating 1 or 2, I duplicate 4, and now I have 8. We are going to do the same thing. Right in the middle, bump, and we should be good. We're a little off, but that's okay. Like I said, we will fix it later. So let's see, we have 8 squares. How many more do we need? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Perfect. I'm going to zoom out one more time. I'm going to select the 8 squares I have. Control-D to duplicate. Do the same thing, kind of attack it from the bottom. And where's my last square? It's this one. Okay, so then I'm going to select these again. I am going to bump it up against this square right here. Yep, there we go. We are bumped. But now we have extended a little bit too far. Like I said, that's okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of smush this into place. So we're going to click and drag and select all 16 squares. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my slider, I'm going to zoom in one more time, so Control-Alt+. Everything is still selected, as you can see. I'll bring my slider down. And so since I have all 16 selected, I'm going to smush every square just ever so slightly. So I'm going to take this middle blue box, I'm going to bring it up right to where it should end. And now you notice too that this square even lines up here, which is good. This square lines up going this way, which is what we want. And so we've created just about a perfect replica of this side of the board. So that's a good start. Now, that's a long process, but just like we can consolidate or compress the steps of creating 16 squares by doubling each time, so 1 turned into 2, 2 turned into 4, 4 turned into 8, and then 8 turned into 16, we're just going to take this whole side and duplicate it and make this upper side right here. So I'm going to zoom out. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's zoom out, and we're going to select the whole thing. We're going to Control-D, duplicate. I'm going to drag it away just so slightly. Now you may notice that there's something weird up here, almost like a little antenna. I have a couple of options. I can actually rotate this all the way if I want to and make it 90 degrees. That's probably the easiest and fastest way. You'll notice too that as you rotate things, it'll kind of snap in at 90 degrees. So 90, 180, 270, 360. It'll sort of snap there, which is good. You also have other rotating options as well. So if I go backwards a step, I can do my 2-finger click or my right click if I'm using a mouse. And I can rotate either clockwise or counterclockwise. So from left to right, and counterclockwise is from right to left. That's an easy way to get 90 degrees. So we're going to do that. Now let's do the same thing. Let's line up our squares as best as we can up here. And luckily, because there's already a reference square, we just kind of snap this into place, and we can zoom in and see if our squares line up. Does this square line up here? It's a little off. This one's a little off too. And it may also be that we have kind of an imperfect picture of the board, but that's okay. We'll work with what we've got. So I'm going to zoom in one more time because I'm a stickler for perfection. Move over here. We're going to smush this slightly. This square looks like it's lined up pretty well with this part of the background. I'm going to slide back over. And this is pretty close too. It's not perfect, but it's close enough, I think. Maybe yeah, if I tuck this in anymore, I'm gonna be off the axis a little bit. I'll settle for this. This is pretty good. Once we get our board in, everything will be aligned to itself, so I'll live with this. And just as we turned one big thing into two big things, we're going to turn these two big sections into the other two sides. Select everything on your board so far, Control-D to duplicate, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my right-click, rotate. I'll do 90 degrees clockwise once. I'll do the same thing, rotate 90 degrees clockwise again. Let's see if we can snap these into place so we don't have to do a bunch of extra work. Now, also too, notice that I clicked away and I've completely unselected everything. If I undo or Control-Z, it'll reselect the thing that I just clicked away from, and it'll take me back a step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. I'm going to try and line this up as best as I can. So there's my little bumper indicator there, and I'll click away. We're close, but not quite. So Control-Z. Slide back down, I'm selected again. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my Shift key, so Shift, and I can start using my arrows to move this around just a little bit, just little teeny tiny ticks at a time. So I want to make sure that these squares are kind of lined up with the game board as much as they can be. And if you notice here, it's the picture of the board that is slightly imperfect. It shouldn't slant like that. So we're working with a somewhat imperfect picture. That's okay, it's fine, we'll deal with it. So what I'll do is I'll zoom out a little bit. What I want to do is I want to get this bottom row done first, and then I'll worry about the top row. Actually, you know what? Maybe not. If I snap this here, And it ends up looking sort of perfect already. No, these ones at the bottom are slightly off. So let's see if we can fix that just a little bit. As much as I love perfection, I know that perfection is something that you can't always achieve. So we'll just deal with it. We'll take this one square, we'll stretch it up just a little bit to line up with our top side. That looks pretty good. Maybe take this other square and line it up so just ever so slightly. So it looks fairly seamless. It's not perfect, but like I said, we're probably not going to get perfect. That's okay. Same thing down here. We'll kind of line up these sections. This square lines up with these squares, which I'm happy with. And down here, let's go ahead and figure out where things start to drift. This square looks pretty lined up here. This one's pretty close. This one's pretty close. This one's starting to drift. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this one square, and I'm going to hold down my shift key and press this square. And while I'm still holding down, I can keep selecting multiple items. So every square I pick ends up in my selection. So I'm holding down shift, clicking all these items. And I'm going to stretch all of these just a little bit. And it looks like they're all lined up pretty well. So now we have the outer edge of our sorry board. And at the end of this project, what we're going to do is we are going to take the background off and use this other tab as a reference picture to see if we have done everything correctly. So that should give you enough to do for today, and we will continue this episode soon.